Is everything looking okay?
Okay, we are now going now. We are now
Great.
going now.
Great.
Oh, yeah. My July is just turning out. It's been better. A lot of it has just been my job. So I don't want to talk about that because that's boring as fuck. But I did have some ideas about my job actually. I realized I took. Oh yeah, we were going to talk about ketamine. I
Oh
took
yeah.
you inspired me to take some ketamine because you kept on talking about these ketamine experiences you were having. So
Okay.
I got inspired and I wanted to do it too. And
Is
among other things, I
did you
realized,
do higher dose?
no,
Okay.
I took one and
Yeah.
took a walk like I usually
Okay.
do.
Yeah.
Although, man, it hit me really hard after I added the salvia. At least it
Oh, I bet.
was very very significant. Yeah, I highly suggest. I know I've told you
Combining.
about it before, but I will say it anyway. That I highly suggest adding salvia to ketamine. For some reason, the two of them just sort of like mix.
I
They're
had a
similar
feeling.
enough that it's not like stacking. Like they really become one
Oh.
experience.
Oh, that's nice. All right, that's good to know.
It's really not. It doesn't feel like you're on two different substances. It feels like you're on on one. And it's funny too because I've done it enough. I get really really high, but then I don't have this like feeling like, oh, this is weird. What's going on? It's almost the opposite. I have this feeling like almost like coming home.
Hmm. Yeah, I would think because of how ketamine works on the emotional parts of the brain, it would quiet any kind of discomfort the brain has from the salvia experience. Like you wouldn't feel that like, oh God, what's going on feeling.
I suppose you could say that. Um, Although I don't usually get a what's going on feeling on salvia,
No, I mean, but that's common.
but it's common, yes.
Yeah.
Also, it's a lot longer, right? Because
Oh
they
yeah.
seem to augment one another in terms of length. Because I
Oh,
just took
interesting.
one moderate dose of ketamine and one moderate dose of salvia, and I was going for about 2 hours.
Oh wow.
So they
Wow.
seem to
That
even,
is
I've
long.
noticed this before too. They kind of augment one another, even in terms of length.
Interesting. Well, shit. That's the 2 hour psychedelic trip. There's a place for that.
Yeah, it's kind of a window that that there aren't very many options for, huh?
2 hours? Not really. I mean, and after, oops, I would imagine after your trip, you physically felt pretty good.
You know, the one thing I don't like about ketamine is the afterglow. I actually find the afterglow, not that it's like really bad, but it's not great. It kind of just feels stony, sort of. I don't really like coming down from ketamine.
Yeah. On higher doses, I usually feel like really dizzy and just kind of like, well, like you feel after generalist anesthetic. Your body feels weird. Can't really walk very well.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I bet. Because you're using. Why don't we talk about how it is that we each do the salvia? So, or
You were
sorry,
you were
ketamine.
about to say something earlier. You said, and amongst other things, and then I asked you a question.
Oh, I don't remember what it
Change
was.
the train of thought.
So I'm doing. Well, I'm using oral sublingual ketamine, and I'm taking one. I don't even know how strong they are. Do you know how many milligrams are in each one of those?
100, 100.
100.
Yeah.
So I'm taking 100. And then what I did this time is I took half, and then it hardly hit at all. And then 15 or 20 minutes later, I took the other one. And then I smoked some salvia, and boy, it was just a rocket ship. Although I'd like to be, more specific. I wish I was better at like trip reports, but I find trip reports really boring, and my own trip reports, they're just so abstract. It's hard to come up with anything to say. I will say that they're not visual. I'm not like visually hallucinating, but it really feels like I'm entering a almost like different realm. Like it's like I'm coming. It feels like when I trip, like I'm revisiting this completely. It's like I'm living two different lives at once: my sober life and my tripping life. And then I enter this other realm of the psychedelic realm, and it feels like I'm coming home. It's completely different. It's really, really weird. But it also, rather than feeling really foreign, it feels more like I'm coming back to my second home. Like I'm visiting my vacation home.
I like how you said it's like a combination of your sober self and your psychedelic experience.
Hey, I don't know how to say his name. I've seen him in my comments before, though. He mentions the addictive properties of ketamine. I'm concerned that ketamine's addictive properties will end up causing a lot of harm if its medicinal use becomes more widespread. Oh, okay. Like in Baltimore, Hopkins, our big hospital is really pushing ketamine. In other words, if it became really more generally popular, would its addictive properties become a problem for more people?
Man, I'll try to not get too loud on this one, but I would say in the realm of addictive compounds, cocaine, heroin, nicotine, alcohol, I don't deal with addiction issues, but I would say it's on the very low end. But if you're a person that has addiction issues, I would say take it seriously of understanding your own addictive behavior and the addictive brain in general. Don't immediately, yes, stay away from things that are addictive, but also understand the addiction is happening inside you. It's not just the drug's fault. So anything that cannabis is clearly addictive. Fucking shopping is addictive. But where do you draw the line,
Well, yeah, they call ketamine hippie heroin, I believe.
Okay,
because
totally.
It has addictive qualities. When I first discovered ketamine, was a little afraid that maybe I had an addictive, that I could become addicted to it. Then I realized it's not that I was addicted to it, it's that I liked it. And the reason I wanted to do it again is because I liked it.
Yeah. Also, addiction tends to mean that you're unwilling to feel the feelings that you have normally, and you're trying to override them with a different feeling via the compound. But you actually need to feel your own, normal experience and be okay with that. Addiction means a lot of things. So I think it's important to kind of define that for yourself. Like you're saying, addiction doesn't mean you like it. That's not really addiction. Addiction means you can't live without it. And because you don't like how you feel normally, that you're ruining your life because you're prioritizing being high. That's a problem. Liking drugs is not a problem. Because we wouldn't do them if we didn't like them.
Well, the question was more sociological, kind of like, if it becomes super popular, is it
yeah, of course,
going to become a widespread addictive problem? And that does happen, right? Of course, on the other hand, we're talking about something that is psychedelic.
My guess
there
is
has
it would
never
not.
been a time when a psychedelic became a big social problem, basically.
Yeah, true.
Not that I can think.
I agree with you. I don't think it would be a big social problem because it's a psychedelic, and because depending on how you use it, it's so immersive that you can't really do anything else very well. Therefore, it's not like you can be a functional. I mean, I guess you could be a functional ketamine addict, but I don't see how.
Oh, I should
Functional
say, I do
alcoholism.
know one guy who actually really does have a ketamine problem.
Well, yeah, you probably know 50 people that have an alcohol problem.
Well, yeah, including him.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's the whole harm reduction thing is super important, but for psychedelics to say, hey, wow, there's 100 people that got addicted, so we better have harm reduction. I don't know, man. And you talk to alcohol and tobacco, well, they should have done that 100 years ago. But yeah, I would think there'd be addiction issues because people get addicted to it. But it's not inherently addictive as much as other things are.
You mean like opiates?
Opiates, benzos, alcohol, nicotine, fucking all sorts of things. Yeah. Cocaine, heroin, any, yeah. But pharmaceuticals for sure. Recreational stuff.
All right.
Gambling.
Well,
shit.
actually, I do have Actually, it wasn't this last time on ketamine, but I did ketamine a couple months ago with Salvia. Basically, this is just my protocol, is a moderate dose, or what Jeremy would call a low dose of ketamine, with a low dose of Salvia. And they're incredible together. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I want to try that. Every time. Oh, sorry, go ahead. You're in the middle of the thought.
Well, since we were talking about addiction, I was going to talk about the revelation about addiction that I had while on Salvia and ketamine. So it occurred to me that the notion of addiction, I'm not saying it's not real and that it's not a problem, but to a certain degree, it's a big excuse. See, what it is there's a pattern. Okay, you drink alcohol every day. Okay, so let's say you have 10 drinks a day of alcohol, right? This is what we would call alcoholism, because that's way too many drinks, right? So you're addicted to alcohol. So there's a pattern of your life of choosing to drink too much alcohol. So if you drink 10 drinks yesterday, that was 10 times you decided to go to the fridge and go get a beer. 10 decisions that you made. Then we call it addiction. And as soon as we call it addiction, it's like we treat it as a disease, like you're a victim. And in a way, I mean, you're sort of, but the addiction itself isn't an entity. And this is my point. It doesn't have power over you. It is a pattern of decision making.
Yeah.
And when you say, "Oh, I'm a victim of my own decisions," you are disempowering yourself. You're taking your own free decision ability to make free decisions and taking it out of the equation. And so the notion of addiction itself potentially creates victimhood and actually makes it more difficult to change the decision-making pattern. And
I like that. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's my whole. This came to me about 2 months ago while I was on ketamine.
I like that. I'll add in though, because I've now had I've had some close friends that are long-time 12-steppers, and the issue, I like the way you're describing it, but the issue of alcoholism is you can't make the no decision. You can only make the yes decision. So while you're making a decision,
I just don't believe it.
Well, I don't think you are really an addict.
I just don't believe it.
Oh, I know you don't. I'm just saying what they say because I'm just adding it. I don't know either because I'm not an addict. But I'm just saying that there's something about the brain that's like incapable of choosing no. Therefore, they forget that they're choosing yes, something like that. But no, I hear you. I would, in my current terminology, I would say, if you're saying addiction, that turns it into a noun. But if you realize it's always a process, it's always a verb or a quality of an adverb, it's always the quality of your process, you're making a decision, then you get to always make a new decision. So yeah, maybe somewhere in there, somebody is incapable of accessing, their power of decision making. And if they could, they wouldn't be an addict. That is possible. I think your theory is applicable, but I was imagining hearing it as an alcoholic, thinking like, well, here would be my rebuttal, which is not my rebuttal because I'm not an addict. So I'm generally on board, but there's or maybe it's trauma and someone doesn't know how to make a decision. Anyway, I like that model.
So
your other model, yeah. Oh yeah.
I always thought maybe we could transition into you talking about your ketamine process and your experiences.
Well, yeah, I will. I had a couple just responses here. Let's see. Well, the one thing is I really want to try, and maybe I'll do a low dose, actually. Maybe that's what I'll do. When I do my usual ketamine, when I'm coming back from that, I do not want more drugs. That's the last thing I want. So, and the truth is that when I'm peaking on my way of doing ketamine, adding anything to it is literally impossible, because even if I could move, I really, really don't want to, let alone trying to operate a lighter. So, but I'm going to try, I think, what you do. I think I'm just going to try, like, for me, a moderate or low dose, and then add some salvia.
So I'm taking typically 100 milligrams of ketamine. How much do you take typically?
I'm estimating 500 at this point.
Really?
Because it used to be, I'm having a hard time putting it together in my head, because I've kind of, what I do now, because I have sublingual ketamine and I have nasal ketamine. And so if I take 3 troches, if I take 300 milligrams, that gets me like high, but I'm not in, ketamine I find has a number of thresholds. Every drug has a threshold where you're like, you're really tripping now. And every drug has multiple ones, different qualities, but ketamine is very specific. First I feel it, but there's a way that my own self identity dissolves, and I'm always trying to get past that point where I'm just a pair of eyeballs. I feel like I'm literally in a dream, which I am, because my eyes are closed. My mind is generating imagery, but there's no self-reflection going on. So it's literally a dream state by those characteristics. There's no self-reflection. I might be thinking about real life things, but in a very kind of almost metaphorical way. Like if I think about, my partnership or this project or whatever, I'm thinking about it in terms of how does it feel, or, what's generally going on with that. It's not really detailed. So anyway, I take, right now what I'm doing is I take 3 doses. When I feel like I'm peaking, which for me, that peak would be, I really feel it, but my mind is at least half sober. Like maybe it's working a little differently, but I can tell my sense of self relationship is still intact. Then I take the nasal, and that puts me over the edge. Then my sense of self is so numbed out that all I have is awareness itself. of the dream, like, or of the imagery, like a dream. And in fact, when I wake up now from a dream, I'll really stay really still in that space, and I've noticed that how my body feels and how my mind feels when I'm dreaming is very much like ketamine. And it's true, your body's paralyzed in your dreams. Your brain does that, so you don't act out your dreams.
Right.
So it's a very, to me, the dream sleeping and being on high-dose ketamine is very, very similar. And I've looked at it from many, many angles, physiologically, psychologically, cognitively. They're very similar. Ego, personal identity, they're very similar. One of my insights, or one of the things I'm trying to work on now, is how to attain that state in normal waking consciousness. Anyway, so I'm kind of working on the philosophy and the practicalities of that. But yeah, that's how I do it. In the past, I either was doing lower dosages, or I would do 3, and then maybe when I felt like I was peaking, I would do like another couple, maybe 1, 2, or 3. Overall, I don't think I've done more than 10 trips, so I think my methodology has shifted. Also, as ketamine gets older, I tend to do more, so that's why I don't have a great bar. But I would say 300 and then some nasal, or 300 and then another like 200, kind of in the middle of the trip. What's nice about nasal, it hits faster. I find that it's a good 35 minutes before I really am peaking on the sublingual.
How long you said? 30?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm laying down, but I am estimating 30 to 40. So yeah, that's how I do it, and ultimately that's why I do it. It's because I find that when I, and this is kind of basic meditation, when I can get out of self-reflection, I think that's the term, self-reflection, self-process. When I can get out of a sense of ego, whatever I look at, I can perceive very directly. I can perceive how my brain works. I can perceive how cognition works. I can gain insight into things about my life that also, and you kind of said this about integrating your sober self and your psychedelic self. One of the overriding themes of ketamine for me is that because it makes it hard to think, you end up, I do, but I believe everyone does, but not everybody thinks about it in this way. But you end up feeling everything, right? Your body feels kind of numb, you feel heavy, but everything you quote unquote think about is you're mostly relating to it from a feeling aspect, but then whenever you're thinking about it, kind of combines, because how you feel about yourself and how you feel about something else is kind of, it might be different feelings, but they're happening in the same body, so they kind of blend, especially when you're high. And now you just have this feeling that everything's integrated, which is functionally the non-dual experience, at least in part. So I'm really using that state of, last trip I took, I've done a lot of spiritual practices in my life, and very different kinds of spiritual practices, psychedelic ones, and Buddhist ones, and Christian ones. And in the trip, all of a sudden, all of them combined into just a doorway into that experience. Because the experience I'm going for, which includes ketamine, is similar. It's always this like non-dual kind of experience, which also might have insight come out of it. But the fundamental experience is that of non-duality. everything feels blended, which I think is very specifically what ketamine does. I get that through cannabis, but it's a very cognitive process to get me to a feeling of unity. I have to go through a lot of philosophy, ideas and how they're actually one idea. But ketamine is like very direct because, yeah. So anyway, that's kind of my general ketamine thing. And I've wanted to combine salvia, and actually, I used to do ketamine where I would do, let's say, just because I don't remember, let's say for argument's sake, it's 3 troches. And then when I feel like I'm coming off the peak, I would do another 3, and then I would do another 3 after that. So it turned into a very long session. But now, because I can take higher doses, it's just hard to eat all the troches at once. I can't quite get all the way. But now that I'm doing both forms, I've only been doing 1 trip. So I'll go all the way out, but the trip seems to last longer, but it's so intense that once I'm coming back, I don't want it more. And also it feels like I've been in this dreamland for like God knows how long. And ultimately it's easier on my body because I think I'm really taking less, but I'm doing more in a shorter amount of time, which to me is the point. Obviously, you could there's lots of people use ketamine for lots of reasons. But for me, getting deep in the K-hole is the point. So if I can do that efficiently, then that's it. I come back and then, I feel weird for 2.5 hours, maybe 3. And then I basically feel fine. Yeah.
What kind of specific work do you feel like you do in the K-hole? You talked about a little bit.
Well, I guess I kind of, I mean, in general, attaining a feeling, emotion / sensation states of unity consciousness, that's kind of the beginning. That's what I feel like it does, if you take enough. So once I'm there, then I've done a number of things. It's changed over time. Recently, it's been all about integration. So, I might think, it's hard to put into words because actually I would say the opposite of you. It's entirely visual for me because I'm laying down with blindfold. So all I have is this imagery. But it's hard to translate into words because it's so personal and low level. But basically, the non-duality happens through a sensation and it happens through cognition. We go through life thinking, I don't know, that we're separate from everything, but like, you see some woman you think is attractive and you're like, wow, how could I ever blah, blah, blah. And there's this gap, right, that you're navigating. But, a year later, when you're in intimate partnership, the feeling is that you're more blended, if that makes sense, right? So it's kind of like that. You can blend with things in your environment. You just have to feel blended. And how you get there is however you do it, right? There's lots of ways to do it. That's kind of what spirituality is for. So recently the work has been, I'll always go in with an intention, although my intentions are fairly
abstract.
It's kind of like the intentions you might have in New Year's, like this year I want to be like healthier, I want to be kinder to people, like that kind of thing. So something like that, kind of abstract, specific to my own life. But last time my intention was I wanted to focus on the nature of self, but I also wanted to let that self contribute to the whole. That was my intention. And so I ended up that was 2 trips ago. And so I ended up, right, because the brain really, I mean, when you set an intention, like, they really work. So my brain really just focuses in, and as soon as the drugs kick in, I can't really change the intention very well because now my brain's working differently. I can't program myself in the same way I can when I'm sober. Now you can navigate, but that intention's running now. And so, yeah, it was all about kind of trying to triangulate what's the core of a nature of the self, and then it moved out into this kind of whole, which for me was defined kind of spiritually. And then the last one,
Your last intention, you mean?
yeah, the last trip, I can't remember what the intention, what ended up happening. I mean, I kind of described what happened. I can't remember what the intention was. Oh, well, maybe it was just that, right, I'm having all these diverse experiences, spiritual experiences. So anyway, I'm not, the outcome of whatever the intention was this sensation of this, like, integration, which is also important for the creative process, right? You might be like, oh, I go to work and I just work, and then I go to home and that's where I do my art. But then on the ketamine, you might realize, like, oh, I can combine them. But your brain was separating them because work is work and art is art, and they're different. There's different words, there's different rules, but that's just your brain. It might be reality too, but if there is an opportunity for a blending of things in your external world via a blending of your internal world, like, what if you don't separate those? What if all the categories, you keep your brain, your thoughts all compartmentalized in these categories? What if that all fell apart and all your content just kind of blended with each other? Then you can kind of do anything, at least think you can do anything or feel you can. So in general, because there's definitely a moment in my life where I'm like, it's time for a ketamine trip, which means I'm doing specific work. And I think that's kind of it. In most other drugs, it feels like I'm creating content. New ideas, new insights. Maybe I'm healing, but that was most of my life. I don't do that a lot anymore, but a lot of drugs seem to create more content, more ideas, new philosophies, new ways of looking at things, a new way of perceiving whatever. But then ketamine is when but the content also is like an infrastructure, right? There's different language rules and there's different ideas and how they fit. And it's almost like when I have enough of that, I do a ketamine experience to go beneath it and to synthesize the nature of the existence of those. I don't know how to put it, but it's like I don't interact with all the content with words anymore. I go to like a lower level, and that's when all the different pieces of content kind of combine into one thing. So it like consolidates. Yeah, if that makes any sense. So it's hard to describe. It's so subjective. I mean, it'd be easier to describe the contents of a LSD trip, because it's like I saw patterns and the tree did this, but in ketamine it's not like that. At least for me, my eyes are closed, number one, and number two, there's no language, so it's all feelings and qualities of feelings, but it interacts with ideas. But the idea, like, if you really learn to quiet your mind and there's really no language in there and no emotional reaction, you can think of ideas, but they're different than before. They're like, I don't know. They're like patterns of memories that have a certain value on them, but it's different than when your brain is always saying, oh, that's the narrative and that's the memory and I felt that way and they're like this and I'm like that. If you stop all that, then what we call thinking is a very different process, which is and quieting the mind is a practice I do every day. So to me, ketamine reaches into what for me is an ideal kind of state of enlightenment, or it informs the qualities of enlightenment that I have to get, not through drugs ultimately, because it's not sustainable that way. But so anyway, that's the best I can describe. Yeah.
Do you ever feel like on ketamine, or somebody mentioned something about reminiscent about this, but that there's a quality of entering a different world?
Oh yeah, literally. You said it too. I would agree. If you take enough, or if you cross whatever threshold is your own threshold, then it very much is. And again, I don't know. I've been sharing a lot of my ideas with Chris lately about all this stuff, reality and what makes reality feel real. And to me, the word feeling is really, really central. And feeling to me includes anything from physical sensation, like touching a flame, all the way to an intuition where you're like, I really feel like I should do this, or I should go, or I feel like it's over there. Like those are feelings, or I love you. An emotion is a feeling. But each of those categories are kind of different. But somehow the word feeling encompasses everything. Because if you felt everything, so it's not quite a sensation because it has more information, but it's not an emotion because it's not really something you can describe with language that easily. It's like in the middle. And that to me is the different world. You're in a different world because you feel that you're in a different world, not because you think you're in a different world. Because if someone says, I think I feel it, you would say, no, you don't feel it. Right? You're like, oh, I just took that acid. Oh, I think I feel it. You're like, no, that's not how it works. You feel it because you feel it, not because you think you feel it. Your brain can create any feeling at once. You can imagine anything and you can feel it. That's easy. Or if it's not, just try it. Imagine a naked woman or man. Imagine falling off a cliff or getting hit by a train. It's going to feel different. Boom. But reality doesn't work that way. Really, reality works the other way. You feel it, and then the feelings tell your brain what's going on, and then your brain creates all the infrastructure that then proves its reality, or lets you describe reality. So I really think it's a different world because the ketamine causes you to feel something, and then your brain says, we're in a different world because we feel it. And then your brain creates maybe ideas of what that reality is, which I think are interesting and can create insight. But to me, the real insight is just the fact that the feeling creates the reality. If you go into a house and you suddenly get scared for no reason, you're you might try to tell yourself, like, you're being silly, stop feeling that way. But if you got more and more scared, you'd probably leave, which is completely irrational, but ultimately has to be real because, we all know it. This is the baseline of addiction. If you feel terrible and you don't want to feel that way anymore and you have no tools to work with it except drugs, well, you're going to fucking take drugs because you can't feel that way all the time. You just can't. If you feel brokenhearted all the time, you're dysfunctional. Feelings are stronger than thoughts. At some point, you have to change how you feel, and that, to me, I really, really think is the bottom line of spirituality in the first place. If you're happy all the time, why would you fucking do anything? You wouldn't. If you had enough money and you were happy, why would you literally get out of bed except to just, if you're happy, it's all these stories of gurus are just happy, so they sit on a park bench for like 2 years, like Eckhart Tolle, or they just sit in meditation. Their devotees have to feed them because they don't fucking give a shit. They're so happy, they don't need to eat. They're not hungry, right? Feelings, there's something about feelings that really, really our culture misses because we're so thought-based. But the truth is, feelings are running the show. And if we saw that, we'd have more access to creativity and changing ourselves, and addiction wouldn't be an issue. That's why a commercial is like, guess what? You smell, or you're not as pretty as this person, but buy our product because now you feel like shit, and you buy the product to feel better. It's all feelings. So anyway, that's my theory. But it's working so far. So yeah. Do you feel like you do specific work, like when it's time to do ketamine, there's a reason for it because you're trying to do something specific?
It is just a feeling.
Okay, it's time to do it.
Yes, and then also there's just the practicality. Part of the reason I use quite a bit of ketamine is because of the time frame, to be honest. Because it's a very practical time frame, especially since I can combine moderate ketamine with moderate salvia and have a really deep experience in just a couple hours. It's very practical. Also, more so than I would say other psychedelics, ketamine is a lot of fun. You haven't talked about that. At least I find that it is like mushrooms. I don't really have fun on mushrooms anymore.
You said it. You finally said it.
Yeah, I think I've said it before, but that is kind of the case. Ketamine, I like what do I like doing? I love listening to music on ketamine. Not playing music as much, and I have played music on ketamine, and it was okay. But if you want to play music, that is where Molly is the best for playing music, I find. Weed is great too. And mushrooms are okay. But listening to music, man, I just love listening to music. Like ambient music or like loungy jazz. I told you about the time that I took some and then I smoked a bunch, like 3 or 4 bowls of salvia back to back, and I listened to Sketches of Spain, the famous Miles Davis album, all the way through. It was the entire Sketches of Spain. 45 minutes of music was the entire peak of the trip.
Oh, nice.
And that time I was meditating on, I do psychic work, or psychic, or how do you put it, psychic surgery on ketamine, definitely. And that time I was meditating on becoming a better musician. And I was trying to like dig down to the lowest level of like working magic on myself, like turning myself into a better musician. And I was focusing especially on Miles when I was listening to his album, listening to his voice and letting him be my teacher and work on me on an energetic kind of a level. So I will do stuff like that on ketamine.
Well, it's just, in case people don't know, Chris is a trumpet player, so that's why, partly why Miles is an influence.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think of my relationship with the trumpet is interesting because I never play anymore. But I still identify as a trumpet player because I'm part of the trumpet lineage. Every instrument has its own lineage, and I come from the jazz trumpet lineage.
Oh, yeah.
And even when I'm playing electronic music, I imagine, it's hard to exactly say, but you could probably hear a certain trumpety quality to the way that I make electronic music because I come from the Miles Davis, Dizzy Gillespie, Louis Armstrong lineage is where I come from, among other
it's the
things.
attack, it's the melody, it's the bending, it's all of that.
Yeah, especially, it's ironically, I'm not doing it right now, I'm just playing chords, but I play a lot of melody, and the way I play melody is very influenced by Miles and Dizzy and Louis Armstrong and other trumpet players. I always say those three because those are the three that a lot of people have heard of. But Miles in particular is a huge influence on me. Even as a person, I'll always quote him and stuff, and I've read his autobiography 3 times.
Yeah, and you're a lineage person. Not surprisingly, I don't feel like I'm of any piano lineage.
No, you're not like that.
But no, I like that. It gives a framework, and it gives something to work. It gives you extra kind of content to work with.
Well, I kind of think of it, don't even have a choice, but I guess that's not how you are. I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine your education has to come from something.
Oh yeah, I mean I've had a lot of education, but
But I know you don't have you don't have a piano, you don't have a Miles.
No, I mean I have people who's like one of my early influences in harmony was Bill Evans.
Okay.
But if I was listening more widely, he was doing what a lot of people were doing. I just like thick, extended harmony, one to the other, which I would say defines modern jazz. I'm more of a process. Well, I'm not saying you're not, but I'm more of a process artist. Like my own artistry is almost more important than my product. Anyway. Yep.
That's Jeremy.
But like the whole psychic surgery, I mean, that is kind of, for me, the self is the palette. I mean, you can do anything, right? Whatever you do in your life ultimately changes who you are, who you know yourself to be. But at some point I realized, like, I mean, obviously we want to live a life, and we want to do things, and we cultivate skills and experiences. But at some level, and I would say probably for a lot of psychonauts, you realize your own consciousness is ultimately what you're affecting. And you can do that directly. Meditation, a million skill tools of self-growth, really, So that ultimately kind of became my interests. Because, at some point, a skill is something you kind of have to do for people, and then there's all those conversations about art and product, and don't find that interesting. Working on yourself. I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about. Psychedelics, all this stuff. You take them. If you want to if you're very externalized and you want to take a psychedelic just to go to a party and have fun and connect with people, then that's what you're doing. And you may or may not end up a different person the next day. And on the other extreme, if you're taking psychedelics to go to the lowest level of your sense of identity and you lay down and put a blindfold on, chances are you're going to be a different person the next day. And I'm not saying there's a hierarchy, but just to point out that psychedelics give us access to these low-level experiences, sense of what creates a self, right? Like, I don't know, a lot of people, I think, identify with who they are at work, or who they are in a hobby, or who they are, identified by something that you can describe. But, in some level of self-realization, I think the realization is the self is created at a lower level than what you do socially. And once you can define or triangulate a sense of self just from internal mechanisms, it gives you this ability. I'm not sure it allows for greater flexibility. It allows to suspend a sense of self. It allows you to increase a sense of self, to change it. Now you can work directly on that level. But if you have to get a raise to get a new sense of self, then arguably it's more work, right? You have to go talk to your boss, and you have to learn a new job, and you have to go into work more often. It's a lot harder than just meditating for 20 minutes every day for 30 years. So maybe it's easier to get a raise. I don't know, but once you learn how to work with the self directly, then you can do psychic surgery, which is a very esoteric notion from the perspective of materialism. Even in DMT, right, where aliens are doing surgery on you, that's very common. Yeah, I would argue, let's just say one possible interpretation is that you're doing it on yourself, but you're not aware of it happening, so your brain has to interpret it as if there's some larger force, which actually was Julian Jaynes in his book The Bicameral Mind. He is arguing that at some point in human evolution, we were talking to ourselves like we do, but we were unaware of it. And then at some point we became aware that, that's our own inner monologue. But before that, we had to account for that somehow. So it became gods, and it became whatever.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that. I always thought it was a weird notion.
Yeah, I haven't read his book, but I'm pretty sure that's the hypothesis.
Well, this gets into a lot of, an area that I will probably be fascinated by for my whole life, is the notion of identity. I think of there's a moment when I felt that I became a mystic, and it was when I did high dose mushrooms for the first time when I was 22, I think. I got into mushrooms when 19, 20, and then I took a full eighth. I think it was a whole eighth. I mean, I was in college, right? So I just made up that it's an eighth. Big bag, right? I did some it was about Christmas time, I remember. And you still there? You're frozen.
Oh. Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. And I was already very spiritual and very religious, and I took the most mushrooms I've ever taken, and I took them alone. And I remember the notion that came over me was that the line that defines the internal from the external isn't an obvious line. That we always orient ourselves towards this is me and this is the other, or that's you and this is me, or this is the other thing and this is the internal, right? Internal, external. But it occurred to me, well, what is the ontology of the line itself? Where is the line and how do I define the line? And I thought, well, wait a minute, that line's not real. This is what I was thinking at the time. That line's not real, which means I'm the whole thing. And since I was also a very, anthropomorphic, I believed in God. I was like, wait a minute, if I'm everything, that means I'm God. And the arguments.
Heresy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, right. Every mystic ends up getting kicked out of his own religion when it comes to those conclusions. And I didn't know the word mysticism at the time. I didn't know what that meant. But looking back on it, I think of it as that is the moment. It's not when I became spiritual, because I was already spiritual. But that's the moment that I became a mystic. Is when I started becoming, for me, it's what it means to me, is the fluidity of identity. Once you realize there's your own identity, what you are, or what is internal, what is external, when you realize that that is fluid and contextual, then you're a mystic. Assuming that this is like real for you, it's not just theoretical. It's also something that you at least occasionally actually feel for real.
Yeah, I would say that's one of the lowest level aspects of, well, yeah, spiritual work, psychedelics, like, yeah, the of consciousness, of realization, of enlightenment, that very thing.
I can't remember why I said that, but I did.
Well, you said you took a big dose, and became a mystic with that realization.
Yep.
Yeah.
If I remember right, at the time, my faith journey was in crisis. I was starting to fall out of being a Christian, and I was worried about it because it was really important to me. And then I came to the conclusion that night, oh, wait, I'm in faith crisis because I'm growing and changing. And actually, I'm going forward. I'm not going backward.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that. I love stories like that. The day you realize that the universe was vastly bigger or worked vastly differently than you had understood previously.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel like a lot. Well, I guess there's two vectors, right? Or there's two axes. It's very easy to work on a horizontal axis, to be a better person, to heal, all important things. Basically, to get your ego healthy, ultimately, is what it is. And then the vertical axis is realizing that what you call ego, or starting to define your terms and to deconstruct what you thought were solid ontologies and realize that there's not. Like, one of foundational ones is that, well, if your brain is where consciousness at least gets organized, and your brain is where all your sensory data come in, then all you can know is what's inside your brain. By definition, you can't know anything else outside your brain and your senses.
Yep.
Therefore, what's reality from that perspective? Or, well, I forgot what I was going to say, but, so these kind of low-level ideas, right? We take for granted that something's real. We always make assumptions. You can't, unless you're a mystic, you have to make assumptions at some point, right? We exist. We don't really know why, but we do. Okay, moving on, right? I mean, science is based on that. Like, everything's based on that. You can't actually unless you're a mystic, get to the root of the nature of reality. A, it's very time consuming, and B, that ends up what you're doing. But anyway, that's a simple thought experiment I like giving people. Of like, well, yeah, reality seems real. However, it's constructed in this way, and you can't get out of that perspective.
You're right. You mean just the importance of subjectivity, basically.
Or the reality of subjectivity.
Yeah. And
especially because if you're a materialist thinker, you take for granted that things are real in and of themselves. But what you're missing is the mechanics of how consciousness works. Then it kind of falls apart.
Yeah. Yeah, the way I think of it is, there's nothing wrong with believing in the material world, but keep in mind that your belief in the material world is itself an interpretation of your subjective experience.
Right. How you organize it, right? How you, even the language you use determines kind of how you make categories. Like it's very organic. What we take for granted, we only take for granted because it's like that 90% of the time. But yeah, I can't remember what I was responding to earlier. Maybe it was where you realized, well, what's the nature of the self? And I just had this thought in my head. It's like, you can go out and you can be like, shit, everyone's being a dick today. But what's really going on is you're feeling angry for some reason and you're noticing the effect on the world. Oh, I was saying this is kind of like the bicameral mind. It seems like a weird idea to consider that we're unaware of our own internal dialogue. But if you consider that we're unaware of lots of things and we're only seeing the reflection, then it becomes easier to swallow because, you know, again, if everyone's being a dick, it might be that you're being a dick or you're angry and you're acting weird and people are responding, but you don't know how, you don't have any awareness of how you feel. Therefore, you have to make sense of the data without knowing the truth, and then you make some sort of story that really is false.
Yeah, it makes me think, you know, with your story as far as the idea that people didn't realize they had internal dialogue at first.
Yeah.
Even the realization that it's your internal dialogue is an interpretation of the experience. You don't have direct knowledge that it's you, right? You're making that up. And you're making that up for good reasons. Like, you always hear it and you can control it. So you're like, oh, it's actually me.
Oh, you mean it might be an entity speaking through you?
I guess you could say that. I'm just making the point that I always make, that these conclusions that you come to are interpretations of your experience.
Yeah, you know, I agree. I do feel like lately, especially on those ketamine experiences, I've been getting down to mechanisms of consciousness that don't feel interpretive. And I know everything is, so I guess I can't in good faith say that it actually is. But if you notice that your brain, there's just there's really low level aspects of how, not who you are, but how, say, identity gets constructed, right? Without even having an identity, you're just watching the method of its construction. And so that's kind of the first time I had a notion of saying that, well, this is actually real. It's like an algorithm. It's not the algorithm itself is it's a process working on data. Whether or not reality is real, that I can buy. But if you have an algorithm that then crunches all the data, well, the algorithm is like this piece of software in your brain that is arbitrary, but are you interpreting it by seeing it? I guess by definition, but it feels so low level that it almost feels like it's a different category because A, it doesn't include external reality. B, it doesn't even include your internal memory content. It's just like saying that, you know, the frequency of beta waves is whatever it is, 3 hertz. I don't know. I forget. But it's like the literal physical although it's actually, it's cognitive. So you know what I'm getting at? I'm
to a certain degree.
I'm interested in seeing this. There's algorithms, right? I don't know computers very well, but my idea of an algorithm is you have this little module that, let's just say a simple algorithm is, you know, if it's a visual input, I put it over here. And if it's auditory, I put it over there, right? Just that that algorithm that just sorts. That's all it does, is go back and forth. That piece itself, there's something about that piece that makes me realize, well, there's lots of those. And if that's all the brain is, there's tons of those, and you can see them. Now you have access to what is quote unquote more real, because you can stop them, and then you can see, well, what happens to my data stream when I stop the algorithms. Well, it looks like Salvia, or it looks like ketamine, or it looks like something, deep trance or dreaming. All of a sudden there's no rules anymore. The data just kind of goes wherever for a different reason. Anyway, I'm curious about that right now.
Yeah, well, what you were saying as far as these algorithms makes a lot of sense to me too.
Yeah, well,
You're talking about how
yeah.
your mind creates reality.
Yes, and again, I don't have a good way of talking about it, but there's a very thin ontological line between thinking and feeling. At one point, I decided that I played with the notion that thinking is high resolution feeling and feeling is low resolution feeling, kind of like fingertips, right? There's more nerve endings, and so you can feel, but if you put something against your forearm, you can still feel it, but you can't feel details like you can with a fingertip. There's no real difference except the density of the receptor sites. So, but I'm not sold on that explanation. But thinking and feeling, I don't separate anymore. I really think there really isn't one without the other, first of all, and the reason they look different is because we don't understand how they're expressions of the same thing.
Hey,
but
did I ever tell you my theory? This is a long time ago, or I don't know if it's even a theory. It's just sort of a phrase that the relationship between spirituality and philosophy. Okay, let me say it. Well, let me stop playing for a second, so I say it right. It's philosophy is to spirituality as pooping is to eating.
Oh, I've already had you said this.
It was a long time ago. Yeah. I came up with it a long time ago. But the idea is kind of like, it comes to mind because it reminds me a little bit of what you're talking about, where you're having these sort of low-level felt experiences in meditation or in contemplation or in a psychedelic space. And then you just naturally start thinking, right? But the thinking is higher level and ultimately less important. It's output, and output is important, but it's not the target. The experience itself is more important.
Correct. Right. Now the pathology is to take thoughts at face value, which then leads us down a healing conversation. So it's kind of in there. It's implied. That's ultimately why I'm looking at this stuff, because I want to correct what I think is pathological sense of self. But yeah, just in the mechanics, I like that. I think that's true. It might be better to say that because we have nerves everywhere, what differentiates thinking from feeling is just the density of nerve impulses. That to me seems mechanically valid. There's a higher density of nerve communication in the brain than there is anywhere else in the body, but the body has a lot of fucking nerves and nerve plexuses and dense sites. It's not as dense as the brain. The chakras correspond to these denser sites, right? That's why you have a gut feeling, because there's so many nerves in the gut, in the enteric nervous system, that it creates a kind of consciousness that's very real, but you can only feel it. You can't think it because there's not enough nerves to actually think. So that might be a good kind of differentiation. It's just a matter of density.
Well, keep in
kind
mind
of like
too,
the fingertip and the forearm.
that when we're talking about thought, we're talking about symbols. So you're having whatever experience, and then you internally come up with symbols to represent those things. Whereas a
Right,
simple
which
feeling, you feel something in your hand, isn't representative of anything other than itself. It just is the feeling.
no, but the only difference is when you get enough nerves in one place, now you have a symbol, and what a symbol is, as far as I understand, a symbol is a series of thoughts all at once that kind of combines into this. Well, a symbol really is a non-linguistic structure. It's an information-rich thing, like a star or a cross, let's say, that you can talk about secondarily, but you recognize it as information-rich. But it's only information-rich because there's that much information to make it localized in the brain. The gut just can't make symbols. There's not enough nerves to do it. But that doesn't mean that there's anything special about the brain versus the gut.
Okay, well, I was just saying the way I think of, at least, of like language, thought.
Oh, I agree with you. But I'm looking at, well, I don't know if there's anything special about it. There's nothing categorically special. It's just denser information than anywhere else in the body.
Well, I guess I would add to that
dopamine in the gut.
I mean, I think you've got a good point that there aren't enough like nerves anywhere else other than your brain to do that work.
Yeah.
But an important part about thought, and I'm talking about like language, words.
Yeah.
Is that they all represent something other than themselves. Right? The word love represents a feeling of love.
Symbol.
That's what I mean by symbol.
I agree. Also, the brain is top down. For the gut, is this true? For the gut to communicate with the arm, it has to go through the brain. But the brain can communicate with anything directly, which probably is why it feels like that's where we are. Is because there's the most activity localized to the brain. It's the through center of everything. So I agree with language, but I'm saying, well, that means the brain has a symbol. That means the brain is controlling the vocal cords to say the word, subconsciously, so that you have an internal dialogue that has the word. You remember feelings, but the feelings are in the gut, or in the body somewhere, probably the gut. So because it can only access a feeling if it remembers the feeling, but it doesn't. The brain doesn't have feelings. The body has feelings, but the brain is like this central command center that organizes everything, really. But what it's organizing is fundamentally equal. It's just organizing groups. It's organizing. What's the word I'm looking for? Compartments of information from different places all around the body. Probably if you have, that's why. I mean, you could say the same thing. Why do you have gut feelings versus hand feelings? Well, you have gut feelings because there's enough nerves in the gut to make a feeling. A hand just has a sensation. You don't have an emotion in your hand. You have an emotion in your heart or in your gut. You don't have it in your hand. But again, there's no difference. It's just there's enough nerve endings in certain places to have certain feelings. That's why you don't fall in love with your mind, really. The feeling of falling in love is in your heart. That's why love and hearts go together. It's not arbitrary. It's because that's where you feel that emotion in your body. It's around in your chest, or anger, right? A lot of emotions you feel in the chest. You don't feel them. Well, yeah. But that's where all the nerves are that do that thing. maybe they're specific to emotion, because that's true. There's different kinds of nerves, but it might be a density thing too. Anyway.
Yep.
Yeah, and why any of this stuff, right? Why any of this? Well, it's interesting. It's fun. Yeah, ketamine's fun. I do downplay fun. To me, consciousness work is fun, and to me, being high isn't really that fun by itself. That's why. Yeah, if I'm stoned, I'm not really having fun. If I'm stoned and having a bunch of interesting ideas, then I'm having fun. So, to me, it's really all about the content. Just feeling dizzy and weird is kind of not fun, really.
I think
it's
I sort of
it's
defend fun because, like, there's such a push to me to be like, oh, this is all therapy and we're doing all this work and like you got to be responsible, and it's all just this excuse to me to like continue to oppress people's right to get high.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. And
so even people who are into psychedelics, will downplay recreation because recreation's bad, and we should still put those people in jail.
Right.
Well, I'm not on that tip. I think having a good time is just fine. Just do it safely. And you might even learn something at the same time.
Totally. Yeah. Yes, I agree. I'm different. I'm a little more hyper related to, I don't know, if I'm on a drug and I'm hanging out with someone who's like not interesting, I probably won't have much fun. So I think having fun is great, and taking drugs to have fun is great. I'm not arguing against that, right? Get a bunch of buddies, go hiking, whatever, go to a party, like do it safely, have fun. To me, I have more fun. Yeah, this conversation for me, sober, is way more fun than being high at a party. I just don't like noise and people. It's just not fun.
Well, then if you're not having fun, then it doesn't count as fun.
No, that's true. Maybe all I want to do is have fun. I guess
exactly.
All I want to do is have fun. I just want to do it by like reading a bunch of books and taking psychedelics and having spiritual insights, because that's what's fun for me. Yeah, I guess healing's not fun. Yeah, you're right. People are trying to repress or fuck them.
That's my point. Thanks.
Like
get to the fuck them part.
Yeah, there you go.
Because there's still, especially in the pharmaceutical world, this idea, everybody who uses a psychedelic is going to, look at ketamine. We have to like be careful and break rules and in order to get the stuff. And it's not even illegal, right? It's scheduled for therapy, but it's still hard to get because there's all this gatekeeping.
Yes, right. Which I would argue is the machine trying to get people to be better workers. They're not saying, hey, take ketamine to heal so you have some crazy insight and you go off into the forest and be an artist and don't work for us anymore. They're saying, that's like Adderall. They're saying, be the best you can be without changing, really. Just feel better by healing. And don't
question the machine, you mean?
Don't question the machine.
We need like happier little workers.
Totally.
I mean, I don't want to push that. I think you're partially right.
Well, I mean,
you can make it more complicated than that, but that's not completely wrong.
The system any system is self-serving.
Yeah.
And if the system is going to say, we're going to allow you access to this drug because we arbitrarily made it illegal, so now we're going to say arbitrarily make it legal sometimes, which is stupid in the first place. But, at least for psychedelics. But they're saying our system is we're going to give this to you for these particular ends, for these reasons. Well, what's the reason? To heal. Well, why are you healing? So you feel better. Well, why? Well, so you can be a better citizen in our system. I don't know that they have any other end, because the system's not designed for any other end. It's just designed for the system, I think.
Yeah, and there are well, it gets complicated, because there are different reasons for, like, why do we have the drug war? There are a lot of different influences on that, and I mean, part of it is a history of puritanical religious beliefs, right? While drugs have been an important part of religious practices for thousands of years, but talking shit about drugs has been an important part of religion for a long time too. It's an interesting. It's like religion can't be neutral about you getting high. They're either really for it or really against it.
Okay, why is that again? What was your premise?
I guess my premise was just that if you want to say, like, why is drug policy or drug traditions the way they are, there's a lot of reasons. Part of it is the puritanical religious heritage,
Oh, I see, sure.
And that's part of it. Also, I think what you said, as far as there being certain forces that don't want us to learn or don't want us to change because the status quo works well for them, that's true.
Yeah. Yep.
Also, you've got, like, the pharmaceutical and the medical industry, that it's actually pro-drugs as long as you're doing it on their terms and they get paid.
And they're pro-illness, essentially, because that's what they're there to do, is fix your illness.
Well, that's not very nice, but, I mean, to a certain degree.
Yeah, I mean, if there was a magic cure for all illness, yeah, who knows if it would see the light of day.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, like, the pharmaceuticals wouldn't like that very much, unless they own it. True. But yeah. Your doctor probably means you the best.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, pharmaceutical. Yeah, corporations, essentially.
Yeah. Let me see. I am wondering how long we've been going. An hour and a half. So we are kind of getting there. Oh, by the way. I was about to talk about Hayes. Hey, man. Hayes just showed up. Hayes, I've been talking to Hayes, and he wants to come back on the show sometime.
Okay.
Oh, did I just lose you, Jeremy? Oh, you're kind of bouncing in and out.
I'm here.
Okay, yeah, anyway, we should have... I've just been so busy that we haven't done many shows lately, and... yeah, please, Hayes, don't take it personally that I didn't have you on the show. We barely even did this show, and this is our only one this month. I do want to keep on having guests, including bringing Hayes back, and other people too. But that means me doing more work, and I'm and I'm just barely hanging on. Go find somebody to come on our show, Jeremy, and we can bring him on.
Oh, okay, sure. Well, if Hayes wants to come on, then that's done.
Well, that too, but we'll hopefully get back into doing it every week, and we can have a lot of people.
Yes, that's true. No, I like that. That's fun.
There's this guy, Son of No One, that I really want to... I know him through Reddit, and he's a big Salvia guy. He does really high doses, and it's the main thing in his life, really. It's like he's the master of crazy high doses, and I want to bring him on sometime.
All right, great. I'm down. Is there any, like, wrap up of all these topics? I guess we just kind of hit on a bunch of different things.
Oh, that's wrong. I fucked up.
If I could change one thing about you, Chris.
Yes.
If I could change one thing, it would be that every time I interrupt you, you remember the thought that you're expressing and can keep going I find that I censor myself a lot because I really want to hear your thought, but I really fucking want to say something, and there's always this internal tension because I feel like if I say something that you're gonna lose your thought, and then I'm like, damn it. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if I could design AI Chris, that's the only change I would make.
Okay, that is fair. As you know, I get distracted by playing too. I've gotten better at that. At first, I would barely even listen to Jeremy because I was so into my playing. And then I realized that he didn't like that, and I don't think the audience liked that either. And so I had to I play more simple now. And if I notice myself getting too interested in playing music, I pull back. I have to be aware in the conversation too. Oh, that's what was cool about having Hayes on, is with 3 people.
You could totally tune out.
I could totally tune out both of you.
And we could just talk to each other. Yeah, because I'll make an impassioned point, and then I have to wait 15 seconds for a response.
That is something I do, though. That is not just a This Show thing.
Yes, you do that. I know.
It's like there's this list of things in my mind at any given time, and I am listening, but you got to wait your time. You got to wait your turn in queue.
I see. Yeah. I know that. Yeah. I've learned.
Yeah, Hayes says maybe next week.
All right. Cool.
Yeah, I think my next week should be easier than the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, we'll talk, obviously. I have a bunch of travel coming up, but I'm kind of trying to organize it so that I can grab an hour and a half wherever I am. So we'll stay in touch about it.
I've always thought if you were busy, I could do it without you, but I kind of feel like you and I is the definition of this show, and I don't even want to get in the habit of, I can make other videos, but this show is the two of us.
Yeah. It basically, it'll be between next Monday and, anyway, yeah, we'll talk.
Okay.
We'll do show.
All right, why don't we call it, and
all right.
We'll see. Maybe we'll have Hayes on next week. We'll be in contact.